When you buy a grave, you don't ever buy it thinking that you're going to put your children in before you.
Where does that come from? Where do you hide something like that in yourself?
I've always said that I've never blamed it, and if I don't blame it, you know, why should anybody else? That's the way I look at it.
I will never forgive John for doing what he did. Why did he do it? Why didn't he take me with him?
Well, where we are today is Ballinkillen. I think it's about 300 odd people living in the community. It's a small village. It's got one shop, one primary school, the church and the community centre and the GAA pitch. And it's a very, very tight community, a very caring community. People support each other. It's a good place to be. It's a good place. I can see the church from the back of the house. I can see the graveyard from the back of the house. So yeah, everything is in eye distance. I went over to Saudi Arabia and I was there for about 1.5 years when I met Sanj. I was attracted to him physically. He was tall, dark and handsome. Very easygoing and he was just a nice guy. He was, and in as much as I'm contradicting what he did, he was a good dad. He was a good dad. And the boys absolutely adored him. Owen was quite a sensitive wee boy. He was shy in his early years, but a good kid. Quite serious, but with a really dry sense of humour. He loved sport. He would try it all, but his passion was hurling. He had a great ability to calm maybe a child that was a little bit more unruly, you know, so he cared. He really, really cared. You know, my big brown-eyed boy. Rory came along when Owen was almost 5. He was a fantastic little brother, much more confident from very early on. He was the little imp, the monkey, had a really, really cheeky sense of humour. Just really bright and again, a happy kid. I found out about 10 days beforehand that Sanj had embezzled money from our local community. That was the first indicator that there was a problem. As it turns out, it was gambling, the stock market, that he was involved in. I would have considered Sanj to be one of the most honest people that I'd have known. So for him to do something like this was completely out of character. I was in shock and trying to come to terms with it and trying to work out what we were going to do. So those 10 days were pretty, I suppose, tough between myself and him. I tried to keep that from the boys. I didn't want them to be upset by it or to be aware of it, really. Owen knew that Sanj had done something wrong. Sanj told him that. But, you know, we went to Duncannon the weekend before they died because that had been planned and I didn't want that to change. And I really, really wanted them to still enjoy their summer. So as far as I was concerned, we kept things normal. At the time, he asked me, you know, was I going to kick him out or were we going to separate? And I remember saying that I didn't know. I don't know where it would have ended ultimately. He didn't give me the chance to find out or to be there.
I met my husband Thomas here in Charleville and I ended up, I suppose, what would you call it, falling in love. That was 30 years ago now. And we got married and we raised our family here. Everyone around me were having babies. We had tried for a long time to have a family. We were married for years, we had no children. and had a lot of miscarriages. We were very, very badly desperate to tell you the truth. And then one day I rang what they'd call a fostering agency. Shortly after that then, we got a lovely little baby boy. John was a very quiet child, God bless him and save him. He didn't go out looking for trouble or anything like that. No, he would be in home most of the time and loved his computer games, and he loved the ponies, loved football and hurling and that. He'd done a little bit of boxing. Turned out to be a fine, lovely boy, God bless him and save him. Gentle giant, we used to call him sometimes. I got pregnant with my twins, Thomas and Betty. The age difference would have been 11 years. It was a fantastic time because we had previously lost our first little baby that we had. Petty was like a March hare. He was wild and he seen no danger. You could go out the back door and Petty could be running along the top of the shed. Whereas Thomas, God bless him, was completely different. He'd, oh, get down, you'll get hurted. He was always kind of minding him. Thomas would come out and help you in the kitchen, chat away. Great little boy to help you clean up. And, you know, there were two different children, but yet they were twins. I loved him, I think, from the minute he see him, God bless him and save him. He went away with him and he'd play football and the whole lot there and come back. He'd never hit him now or roar at him. It was always, oh, you boys, and the hand around him. And they were all his brothers and that was it. And they all looked up to him as their big brother. He was never violent or anything like that. But then one day, he kind of gave me a shove up against the wall. Are you trying to poison me? And it was then I knew that the boy that was standing in front of me he wasn't mine, he wasn't right. And I know it was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I had to go to a court and get a barring order. And I had to ask the judge to help me, to get John help. He always knew that he was adopted. And then I got a phone call from the adoption agency, social workers in Dublin, saying that he had wrote him a letter saying that he wanted information and that he was entitled to it. And that if he didn't get it, he was going to do harm to himself. And I asked her on the phone, I said, look, please, I said, whatever information John needs, I said, please give it to him, I said, so he can close that book in his life. He still ended up in limbo at the end of the day. If I knew at the time that John was as sick as what he was, I would have made sure he had his proper medication. And I wouldn't have left him with the responsibility of the boys on the day that I left the house.
My father was from Ballycotton originally, and his father was from Ballycotton, and my mother was from Mogeely, which is about 7 miles away. All my brothers and sisters are based in Ballycotton. It's a lovely small seaside resort, which is lovely in the summer, a bit small but dreary like everywhere in the winter. Everybody knows everybody in Ballycotton, yeah, which can be a good thing. I met John roughly 6.5 years before we got married. John was tall, dark and handsome. He was quiet, but you know, we socialised every weekend really, like any normal person would. He didn't seem to portray any symptoms of depression at the time at all before we got married. So we got married in 2000, and 6 weeks afterwards, John had an accident in where he worked, and he suffered with post-traumatic stress disorder. That accident did change an awful lot of things, you know. John stopped going out. He hurt his back as well. He wasn't able to drive. He was out of work for nearly 2 years. So our socialising stopped really 6 weeks after getting married. It was very hard to deal with, you know. That was the first instance really of John suffering with a psychiatric illness. I don't believe that he ever recovered from that illness. So he was born on Friday the 13th of August 2004. There was a thunderstorm outside, which was amazing for the middle of summer. John was very happy at the time, you know. She was a lovely child. She was bubbly, very sporty, involved in gymnastics, judo. She was in first class in school. Outgoing, very outgoing. Little girl. She was 6 since the August, but I suppose at one stage she had to make a choice between Irish dancing and gymnastics. So she came from gymnastics straight to Irish dancing, and she was just jumping and hopping around the place, which was hilarious at the time, you know. Ella was born on the 2nd of July in 2008, and she was very mischievous, whereas Zoe was, I suppose, quieter. Ella, she knew what she wanted, and she was mischievous, whereas she was always pulling Zoe's hair. So these are the memories that I have that you don't get from anything else, really, you know, that a child, the joy and that children bring you, you know, the innocence. I do believe that, you know, it is a gift having children, but yeah, beautiful 2 little girls. John minded Zoe and Ella 2 days a week, and we had a childminder, Anne, who minded Zoe and Ella the other 2 days. John always said that he felt good when he was occupied, so when he was minding Zoe and Ella, he felt better. And he was a good father. Family life was good. I was working 4 days a week. John was working maybe 1 or 2 days a week as a JCB driver for a local firm. But recession had hit, and I think he was worried about finances, about work, I suppose, you know, being the breadwinner for the family, and worried about, I suppose, everything in general. And that's when his depression came back.
He had said to me earlier in the day that he would take the boys out in the afternoon and was heading off into Carlow to go bowling. And he just gave me sort of an afternoon to myself. Said goodbye to the boys. It probably got to about 9:30 and I started wondering where he was. It wasn't that unusual. It was summer holidays. You know, I didn't really think too much of it. I tried phoning his phone, but there was no reply, and then I discovered that he'd actually left it upstairs. Another hour went past and I started getting anxious. I couldn't find the key to the second car, so I had to phone my brother, and we went into Carlow just to see was he in there somewhere, because even still at that stage you're not really thinking that there's anything wrong. There was no sign of him in Carlow. Came back home, and I just kept hoping as we were driving up the road to the house that the car would be here. And it wasn't. So at that stage we came in and I phoned the guards. The rest of the night is somewhat of a blur. There were guards in and out, and I had to get photographs of the boys and things like that. So there were people kind of coming and going a lot for that evening. I called various people then that I thought he might have gone to, including his brother up in the north. I also, in my head, thought that he might have just gone to the UK over to his mum. So we phoned his mum at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and he wasn't. And that's when you started to kind of lose a little bit of hope. But at the same time, you know, it was like, he has to be somewhere. He's just hiding somewhere. Are the boys frightened? Are they wondering what's going on?
They were reported missing at 1:30 a.m. this morning. Mr. Chada left his home at 6:30 p.m. yesterday evening with his children. At the time, Mr. Chada was driving a green Ford Focus.
You know, it was getting worse. You were getting more and more scared, and I wouldn't let myself.
All day long, road signs along the major routes accompanied the search for the 2 boys and their father, in the hope that drivers may help track the missing children.
Then I went into the bank that morning to see if there was any activity on the account. Then one of the detectives came and had to give a statement, and I was in the midst of that statement when my mobile rang. It was a number I didn't recognise, so I picked it up and answered it, and it was Sanj. And he just said, the boys are dead in the back. And so I kind of lost it at that stage, and I was like, no way, they couldn't be. So the detective took the phone at that point. And I remember screaming, and I remember sitting on the couch just staring at the detective and going, please tell me my boys are okay. And I remember the seriousness of his face. And I remember him saying, Kathleen, he couldn't confirm at this point. He had to wait. I wanted somebody to say, that's not my boys, and that they're okay, but it wasn't.
This evening, that nationwide search was stood down. Gardaí were alerted to a single-car collision outside the town of Westport in County Mayo this afternoon, where the 2 children were found dead. Their father's injuries are not believed to be life-threatening.
Apparently, he was attempting to kill himself. It was a very, very pathetic attempt, if that was the case.
The scene was discovered less than 14 hours after Owen, Rory and Sanjeev Chada were reported missing.
I afterwards discovered that the boys died somewhere around about 5 o'clock in the morning. So for all that we were doing throughout that day, it was too late.
We had met a man in Dungarvan, was selling one of the old barrel top wagons. This was a small little miniature one. And the boys had seen us, all 4 of them, and they were mad about it. So we dealt for the wagon. Then we made the arrangements then to go down. We had to collect the wagon. So John got me with him, said to me, I'll collect the boys for you, Mummy. He said to me, if you lay me the price of the diesel. So I said, if you're taking them in your own car now, I said, make sure you put in the booster seats and stuff, and strap them in properly. So we went down to Waterford anyway, and we got the wagon, got a cup of tea, and we were coming back along. And so we were just coming in through Kilmallock when the phone rang. And it was John. And he said, where are you now? Just go through to Perry, son. So I think we should be home in about an hour. So everything all right? So the children all right? Yeah, Mummy, he said, everything is fine, he said to me. Here, he said to me, Paddy wants to talk to you. So we put Paddy on the phone, and he said to me, Mummy, did you get my wagon? And I said, yes, and said to him, I got it. I said, it'll be lovely now. Paddy said to me, I love you, Mummy. I said, I love you too, son. I said, be a good boy now, say for John, won't you? And he said, I will. Put me back on the phone to John, and I was talking to John for a few minutes. Again, as I said, no change in voice, no change in attitude, nothing. Only, I'll see you when you come home, Mummy, he said to me. Don't be in any hurry, take your time. But apparently, about 15 minutes after that phone call, something terribly went wrong with John. And I lost my 3 boys that day.
A trampoline, swings and a slide, all sad reminders of the twins who spent hours enjoying playing outside their house at Deer Park in Charleville. Thomas and Patrick O'Driscoll, described as lovable rogues, had just finished up in school when their older brother Jonathan collected them and brought them home in the afternoon. But for some bizarre and unknown reason, murdered them shortly afterwards.
I think any mother's nightmare was to turn the corner and see crowds of people and yellow tape wrapped around my house. Before I knew it, there was a woman guard talking to me. I just asked her to find my son John. And I asked her not to hurt him because he didn't know it. He wouldn't have done this. She came back about an hour after, and she put her arms around me, and she said to me, I'm so sorry, Miss O'Driscoll, she said to me.
A few hours later, the body of 21-year-old Jonathan O'Driscoll was found around 15 miles away in Buttevant. Gardaí say he died by suicide.
It was just like a nightmare that you thought you were going to wake up any minute and this wasn't going to be happening. What a nightmare that went on. I was supposed to go on until the day that we all pass away.
Born in London, in Cricklewood, and moved back to Wexford then in 1977, so 40 years ago. So I've been in Wexford ever since. I met Sharon was actually in a nightclub in town. Started chatting and kind of went apart from then on. Sharon was very quiet, but once she got to know her, she's a lovely person. We had a lot of fun times together, sitting down just talking or listening to music. We started living together, and the family wasn't planned, but we got a nice little surprise then on 24th of September 2000 with Michaela come along. It was brilliant the way it worked out, you know, it sort of all fell into place. And then Abby was born then on the 24th of September 2001. And then later on that year, the 20th November, we got married. Michaela, she was very, very much like her mother. Very quiet, showed even more than when Abby came along, because she was like a second mother to her. You know, she was the big sister, but she was always cuddling her, making sure she was safe. And I mean, they were never apart, you know, so. Whereas Abby now, she was a bit wild. She had no fear, bubbly, like, full of fun, full of development. I've always said, and I always will, Sharon was a brilliant mother with the kids. She was great with the kids, and always lively with them. You know, always, she'd be one of the kids half the time playing with them, you know, so no, there was never anything. I never worried about the kids when they were with her or anything like that. Myself and Sharon had split up the previous year. Obviously things weren't going right. We tried to make it work again and just didn't work out. And the last time I had the children, it was Patrick's Day, 2005. And that was the last time I seen the two kids until 2 days before they died. I was trying to get in contact with family services and stuff like that to, you know, so I could get access to the children and get regular visits and whatever. So I think that's what sort of caused a few of the problems then as well, you know. She might have thought I was trying to take the kids away or whatever, I'm not sure. But I mean, that was never on the cards anyway. I just wanted to see the two kids, so. A few of us were all going to Cork for a poker tournament. And I was in the supermarket getting some stuff for the trip away on the Thursday. And I bumped into them. So I spent about 10 minutes in the supermarket with the two kids. And that was the last time I seen them, so.
It was a Tuesday morning, the 16th of November 2010, and the alarm went off, and John nudged me anyway and he said, get up, it's 7:30, and I said, oh, rub my back there, you know, my back is aching. So he did rub my back, but he did seem a bit tense or nervous, but this wasn't unusual. I left home about 10 to 8 o'clock for work. That morning I was worried, but I suppose there were many days that I was worried going to work, but I would always ring to see how things were and everything was okay. I always did that anyway, you know, every day, and had kind of like Zoe and Ella were always fighting for the phone, to answer the phone, so. But that morning, no one answered the phone. On my way to work, I rang John's sister, asked would she mind, you know, ringing John saying would you ever come down to keep him occupied for the day, knowing that he was a bit agitated. I was ringing the house phone, John's phone, and there was no answer, and John's sister came back and she wasn't getting any answer either, so an hour later I decided I'd drive home to make sure everything was all right. Well, I was aware that there was a crash up the road and the guard wouldn't tell me, you know, who was in the crash or what the story was until my brother had met me and told me what had happened, that John had killed Zoe and Ella and he had crashed into a wall and killed himself. I think I just didn't believe. I didn't want to believe what I'd heard. And driving past my own house, there was a guard standing outside, and my brother said, do you want to ask him, do you want to go down? And he said no, I wasn't allowed. But I think because I didn't see what had happened to Zoe and Ella, In my own mind, I couldn't believe what I had heard. John had never been physically violent towards myself or Zoe or Ella. It was very difficult living with him when he was suffering with depression, but never had he physically harmed any of us at all, you know, ever. I remember arranging the funeral, the guards being around, obviously because it was an investigation. And when Zoe and Ella's bodies came home, I just didn't want to touch Zoe or Ella because I knew that if I felt them, they would be cold, you know. It was horrific. I think I was in denial for quite a long time as to what had happened. I couldn't believe that John would have done such a thing. Why did he do it? Why didn't he take me with him?
Prior to the crash, the 43-year-old filled up a 5-gallon drum with petrol at this petrol station, then crashed it into a wall just miles from his family home. It's today being revealed that John Butler was being treated for depression, but no one ever thought it could erupt in such a tragic way.
I can't make sense of it. I've looked and searched for letters. Only 13 weeks before he killed Zoe and Ella and himself, he had been discharged from the mental health services, but he was still on the same dose of medication that he was with the past 6 months. I do believe that had I been involved in John's treatment in greater detail, they would have learned about his behaviours at home. I do believe that John went in and told the medical professionals what he wanted them to know and didn't give them a full story or a full picture of what his behaviours were at home, you know.
The whole family was just gone. And all because of a mental problem that was just worse than cancer. It was just hidden and then just came out and swallowed him up.
Wherever there was one, the other was never too far away, said one grieving relative. Mourners heard how the twins were honest, direct and famous for their hugs. Hugs their mother Helen and father Thomas will miss dearly.
With organised funerals and organised burying the boys.
Just hours before Thomas and Paddy died last Thursday, their parents had bought them a miniature wagon which they never got to see. Today their pony pulled the wagon ahead of the 2 white coffins.
But when you buy a grave, you don't ever buy it thinking that you're going to put your children in before you.
We were down in Cork and I got a phone call, I suppose, it was around midnight from Sharon's mother, wanting to know if I'd heard from Sharon that day. And that her and the kids said that her and the kids were missing. Walking up and down the hotel room that night, and I got a couple of calls during the night checking up, and there was no word. So in the morning, I told my brother.
It was early enough, and he just said, Sharon's missing, like. And he said, I said, what? And he said, we got a phone call and Sharon and the kids are missing, like. And I said, right, let's go. You know, so I said, give us 10 minutes, we'll just pack up quick and we'll just head back to Wexford.
We came down, travelling back down from Cork, and I was in contact with her mother the whole way down. And I just knew halfway down that there was a problem, that there was something major gone wrong. I just heard it in the voice.
You know, we were all worried, but then we were saying, she's you know, she's probably in her friends or somewhere, like, you know, don't be worrying her all or whatever. And I kind of really got a horrible sensation just when we got to the bridge in New Ross.
Got back to Barntown, called into Sharon's mother's house, and she told me that the 3 of them were gone. That was a tough time. Like, I just remember crying on the road, and it was pouring down rain.
I just seen Barry coming out at the front door, and he ran out into the middle of the road, and he was screaming, like, and I just said, stop the car.
Vinny come back, my brother, and picked me up. We went in, we had to tell my parents then.
And I said, Sharon and Abby and Michaela, I said, they're dead.
It's difficult to believe what was discovered here on the tranquil shores of Cat Strand in Wexford. 29-year-old Sharon Grace, 4-year-old Michaela and 3-year-old Abby were found together by local fishermen yesterday. Locals say the small community is devastated.
Remember very little about the funeral. Well, the one thing that I can remember was reporters up in the trees taking photographs. That really annoyed me. It kind of made it like a circus, the way it was reported. And even the words murder, suicide, things like that. It's so hurtful when you're in that situation. You know, there are proper words for it. You know, use them. Reading things like that, knowing what Sharon was like, and then she's portrayed like that, that made it 10 times worse. Still couldn't understand how it happened, because Sharon just wasn't like that. She'd never harmed the kids. She loved the kids so much. Maybe that's why she did do what she did, because she loved them so much, you know. So that's the only thing I can think of, really, being honest.
I had met with the funeral director already, who was a great support, and they put a lot of pressure on to get the boys released. They were released on the Wednesday, and he went straight over, brought them home, so they were back home together for those final nights, which was lovely, actually, is the only way of describing it. How do you describe, you know, a wake for your two children? But it was lovely for me, because I got to spend those last couple of nights with them. And that was important. It's important.
The two hearses drove side by side as the young brothers were brought from their home in Ballinkillen to the local church. Their grief-stricken mother Kathleen walked between the hearses carrying her two sons, supported by her own family members, as did the boys' 14 cousins, singing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star as they walked.
I look at photos of my boys and go, how can anybody do something like that to two beautiful, beautiful boys that they profess to love?
The 43-year-old was arrested and brought to Westport Garda Station, where he was questioned until midnight last night.
When he was pressed again as to why this had happened, Sanjeev Chada said, money. I ruined everything.
Sanjeev Chada spent his first night behind bars here in Castlereagh Prison last night.
Where does that come from? Where do you hide something like that in yourself?
This morning, Mr. Chada's solicitor told the judge he had concerns for his client and asked that he be watched and psychiatrically assessed. However, when asked by the judge if this was for a fitness to plea, Mr. Hanley said it wasn't and withdrew the application.
He didn't have any psychiatric history, he had no mental health issues. So where does it come from? You know, all he had to do was walk away, really. Actually, all he had to do was stay and face what he'd done. Sand wrote a number of letters after one to the boys where he talked about the fact that he wanted to be there for them. He wanted to be around to teach them. And as I said, to teach them what? To teach them to lie, to cheat, to kill. It makes no sense, and it will never, ever make any sense that he did what he did. You're dealing with the grief, you're dealing with the loss of Owen and Rory and that, but you're also dealing with the thought that you lay next to this person every night.
The jury took just minutes to return a verdict of unlawful killing in relation to the deaths of Owen and Rory, whose father last month began serving a life sentence after pleading guilty to their murders.
But we know that life doesn't mean life in this country, so he'll get out of jail at some point. There's a part of me that thinks that I'll end up bumping into him over the grave someday in the future. That bothers me, because he shouldn't.
I've always said that I've never blamed it, and if I don't blame it, what should anybody else? Obviously there was problems there, so, you have to see the whole picture. That was not shown. It was so out of character. And, okay, in my darkest times, I said, how could you have done that? Of course I've questioned it, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't her. It sounds strange, but I don't think I could ever blame it for it.
I will never forgive John for doing what he did. He wouldn't expect me to. A work colleague of mine said, if you don't forgive, maybe you'll never be able to move on. But it's not an anger that I have. If I forgave John, it's like saying what he did was acceptable or okay. And that's with all the cases here in Ireland, because people seem to think if a person suffers with their mental health and they kill their child, the cases are brushed under the carpet, and it's like it's acceptable because they were sick. He was sick. I can't forgive John, I never will.
They still can't say why he done it, because it wasn't him. It was the people inside in his head. When John snapped that day, it wasn't the boys he was looking at. They could have been anything in front of him. He had 3 different problems. He had schizophrenia, bipolar, and depression. He was fighting his own battles, the creator, and we didn't even know it.
Angry, yes. I don't see him as evil myself, so I wouldn't say that. And I don't believe he deserves compassion. I think he needs to be seen as a murderer. He took Owen and Rory's life for no reason at all other than his own selfish belief that they would be better off dead. So he doesn't deserve compassion. He doesn't deserve understanding. I wouldn't waste the energy that would come with hatred and let him serve the sentence that he has been given. I believe he should die in prison. There is nothing that can make up for what he did. So there is no rehabilitation on this. There's nothing that he can ever do that changes what he did, that makes it better. But please let him serve his life sentence.
I go to the graves, but I won't tell lies. When I go to the graves, it's like a piece of me is missing every time I do go. And it isn't easy to walk into a graveyard and look at a photograph of 3 strapping young boys. Probably have me tortured with girlfriends now if they were alive, These are things you're going to miss. My goal would be, I would like to explain to younger children that it's not wrong for a small child to come up and say there's something wrong. I would like to get in there and try to be a part of that. I'd like to be a part of suicide awareness in the schools and get the word out there more. That kind of takes a load off your heart, knowing that you're after probably helping someone else. Some other child won't go through it. Some other parent won't go through it.
It's the 16th of April, obviously, the day they died, and the 24th of September. That's the two girls' birthdays. They're two really tough days. Every year, for those days, I go out for a walk out to Castown, have a chat to them. Our generation wouldn't have talked about things. Whereas if you catch people young and get them to talk and get them to open up. You know, I think things like that should be mandatory in school. You know, that's where you want to catch it in secondary school, you know. Educate. Have it part of the curriculum. That you talk about things like that.
I try to run away from it, but you can't run away from it no matter where you go. And if someone asked me, are you sorry you ever met John? I would say no, because I wouldn't have had Zoe and Ella, and that was a gift. I believed that I only had Zoe and Ella for a short while, unfortunately, but the joy that they brought, I don't think I'll ever experience again, and I have those memories. I do believe they're with me. But it is very hard to get up every day and knowing what I had and the joy that Zoe and Ella brought me, and to have they had their lives taken by their own father is horrendous, and I believe that it could have been prevented because of his mental illness. That is what killed my children. So that's why I'm campaigning for changes to the Mental Health Act for family and, you know, spouses and partners to be involved in the treatment without breaking patient confidentiality.
I do firmly believe that I will be reunited with them, that I will be with them at some point in the future, and that they'll be waiting for me. This is just my life, and I'm living it the best way I know how. There have been moments, and I know I'm not suicidal. I know I don't want to take my own life, but there are many, many times where I wish I wasn't here. And that's not to say that, you know, I need to go into a decline either. It's important, and that's the thing, re-engaging with life has to happen. So I do it the best way that I can, and I know how.
Gardaí at the Chada home in Ballinkillen near Bagnallstown in County Carlow tonight, as friends and family comforted Kathleen Chada after the devastating news her young sons, aged 10 and 5, had been found dead in County Mayo after leaving their home the previous evening to go bowling in Carlow town with their father, Sanjeev, an outing from which they never returned.
It was a normal thing for them to do. It was the summer holidays, so there was absolutely no reason to think that there was anything behind it. Yeah. I mean, people know that we subsequently discovered that he was a gambler and had embezzled money, but even at that, I would have assumed, or I thought, that we were in the position where we were actually working through that and coming
as a family,
as a family. Yeah.
When did you realise then that there was something wrong?
That night, probably about 10. Between 10 and 11 was when I started to think about it, because I kind of thought, well, they've gone bowling, that's where they're at now. They've probably gone to something like McDonald's or something like that.
Yeah, for a treat.
They should be home.
Yeah, that was what I thought. Got to 10 o'clock and I thought, there was no answer from the phone, and that's when you started to suspect.
Why do you think he did it?
The only conclusion I can come to is shame, to be honest, which isn't a good enough reason, but there's no good enough reason. No. That's the reality. So it's very, very difficult to actually put a reason on something like this. But that's the only conclusion I can come to. He had no history of mental health issues, no history of depression.
And he never acted in any way. Was he ever violent towards the children?
Not at all. Not at all. He was the most passive of guys. I mean, he would have been the peacemaker.
In the house, if there was a row.
If there was a row. Even when he was in college and things like that, friends would have said he was the one that was the quiet one, if you like, and the peacemaker, the one that kind of kept things calm.
Kathleen, I know that you did find an email afterwards that he was actually planning on killing you.
Yeah. And that was probably about 6 or 7 weeks afterwards. I found an email that he through other sort of channels, and in it was a suicide note in which he intended to take the 4 of us.
Oh, and what about himself?
He would have included himself in that. So it was something like raise a glass to Kathleen and the boys. Don't forget about me, but raise a glass to Kathleen and the boys. It was something along those lines.
You just mentioned there he had no mental health, because a regular person who turns on TV or reads a newspaper and hears about this, you would say this person had mental health issues and is crazy and should be locked up somewhere. But he went through the system, and this man is not mentally ill. And if he was, he would have been in the central mental hospital, and you can understand that. But he did this with nothing wrong with him. That's the reality, and there's just no way. So this is why you're here today, to say, you know what, this guy should not get out. I don't care that he was my husband.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll still contradict myself sometimes and say, I know he loved the boys, and yet his actions absolutely show a total disregard and the opposite. But absolutely, he should never get out. In reality, life should be life in this case. We want to change.
Yeah, because that's what it's about.
This is SAVE, sentencing and victim equality. So what we're really looking for is a review. We know that there are changes happening with the parole bill at the moment.
It's 12 years. They're looking at that they can't apply for parole for 12 years.
That's minimum. Now, if you look at that, actually, the bill that we've seen and read through, it's actually just extended it to 8 years. I know John Costello, the chairman of the parole board, has said that it's 12 years. He said that to me personally as well. I've met with him. He's been very accommodating, and in fairness has invited us in to meet with him, which is reassuring in a way, because it means that they're certainly willing to engage with us. But the government need to do this. This is not about the parole board making these decisions.
Well, it's legislation.
It's legislation, and that's tough. It's a huge time, I suppose, a long time that's going to be involved in this. And what we want is justice. I mean, I talked before about Owen and Rory. They had an incredible sense of justice themselves, both with each other in the house, on the playground, in school. So for me, that's what this is about. It's fighting for them, and justice for them.
It's coming up to 2 years. I know.
3 years.
3 years, apologies. Coming up to 3 years this November the 16th. Has that passage of time given you any sense of a greater understanding of what was happening or what John was suffering?
I suppose the first year I was in shock, really, and I started researching Filicide in Ireland, and I was shocked to find out that there was, since 2000 in the Republic of Ireland, there have been 27 cases of Filicide, and 38 children have been murdered by their parents specifically. There have been other cases where not related to the children or the parents, that parents and children have been murdered. So there's more than 27 cases of Filicide here in the Republic of Ireland alone. And I just feel that when you're living with somebody suffering with depression, that it not only affects that person, but it affects the whole family. So at the moment, the Mental Health Act 2001 is being reviewed by an expert group, and I've made a submission for legislation to be changed to involve spouses or partners living with the person to be involved in the treatment, and that's without breaking patient confidentiality, especially for the welfare of children, because the medical professionals only hear one side of the story, and that's from the patient. They don't. They would have a greater insight into the behaviours at home, whereas a patient would only see the doctors, maybe once a week for an hour. And
do you feel if you had been involved, say that was in existence when John was suffering, that spouses were included and were advised as to the reality of the situation and whether there was medication or not, and the mental state of their other half, do you think what could have happened could have been avoided? That's a horrible question to ask you, but do you think that it could have been avoided if you were included?
Well, I definitely feel, yes, it could have been avoided. There is a percentage maybe there that it could have happened as well, but I do believe that especially the medical professionals might have treated John differently. having heard my side of the story, and that would be without discussing what John would be telling them, discussing it with me. So they'd have a greater insight into his behaviours at home, because he wouldn't, I don't believe that he would have told them everything of his behaviours at home,
Also, if you were part of a joint treatment programme, or if you were involved in that, you may have gotten a better indication of the potential to happen, or what did happen.
And also, I believe that maybe if I was educated on the illness as well, if there was a support liaison person there for the family to explain the illness, maybe the side effects of the medication, that the effects that it would have on John, that I would have been able to understand it better as well.
You don't blame yourself in any of this?
No, I don't blame myself,
good,
not at all.
Good.
No.
There's no guilt, there's no... But you just wish that if you'd been involved, there might have been a very different outcome. This might have been avoided.
Yes, yeah.
And that's what you're lobbying for?
I'm lobbying for legislation to be changed, especially for the welfare of children, and for risk assessments to be carried out on families. Really, for a support person to be there for the family. And the medical professionals would really... Maybe I would have believed that they might have treated John differently had they have heard my side of the story. Yeah. They only get one side of the story, and that's from the patient.
And is this all bound up with patient confidentiality? Is that really the sticking point where this is concerned?
I do believe so, yeah. But I do believe patient confidentiality is very important as well. So,
it's a difficult one, Una, isn't it?
It's a difficult one, but I believe that the medical professionals don't have to discuss what, for example, what John would be telling them. They could hear my side of the story.
And then make an assessment based on that.
And make an assessment.
But I mean, given husband and wife have joint custody, have joint ownership, it's a joint life.
Yeah.
Therefore, if there is a major emotional or mental problem in the family, then it's a joint problem.
Exactly.
And it requires joint action.
But why is the mind treated differently to the body?
Yeah.
If somebody had cancer, the family are brought in immediately.
That's how you get through
Alcoholics
depression.
Anonymous, the family are brought in. Why isn't it the same?
Well, this goes down to the heart of what this week is about, though. This is the stigma attached to mental illness. There's one of our colleagues is in the paper this morning. She makes a very, very good point. And she said, look, if I had a broken arm or a broken leg, I'd go to hospital. Yeah. People would think there was something wrong with me if I didn't. If I have a broken brain, what do I do? Yeah. And nobody wants to hear me talk about it either.
Yeah.
So what is it about us that we think that it's perfectly acceptable, and we'll discuss broken arms, operations, we'll discuss them ad nauseum to the point where people are sick to death of them. Yeah. But if we have something wrong emotionally, we are, as a society, we're ashamed of it, and as a society we don't want to hear about other people talking about it.
Do you think it's changing though, Una? You sitting here talking about this, which is very impressive considering what you've been through, you sitting here talking about it is a sign that things are changing.
Well, I think more in-depth investigations need to be carried out in order for the medical professionals to learn, and for us all to learn about these cases. If they're not going to investigate them, they're not going to learn anything
and it'll just
to
keep
help
happening.
Prevent other tragedies from happening.
And how are you?
I'm all right. There's still an air of unreality about the whole awful living nightmare, really. My girls were my world, and sometimes I just think, is this really after happening, and it's very, very hard living without Zoe and Ella, and sometimes I just think I'm floating really from day to day, and I have great support from my family and friends and work colleagues, but I went to Italy this year in June and attended an international conference on Filicide, where there was 13 countries. It was the first international conference. There were basically Chile, Australia, Malaysia, Canada, and it was very interesting to hear. There was 52 people there, and a lot of them were academics from colleges, medical professionals, and they presented papers on Filicide in their countries. And especially in Australia, there was academics went in and they interviewed the perpetrators afterwards to find out, what made them do this. And it was a 2-day conference, but it was amazing to see so many people researching it in their countries.
And can I ask, have you been to counselling?
I go to counselling.
You do go to counselling. That's what I was wondering. Because you wouldn't be able to get through this otherwise.
I go to counselling every week.
Do you find that helpful?
I do, yeah. I find it. Yeah, I haven't taken medication because I do believe it would numb the pain, but my grief is my pain, you know. It's not going to go away. It's just learning to live with it every day. And, you know, some days you've bad days, you've good days. And it's always there. You know, my lots of my girls are always with me, but I believe Zoe and Ella are with me, carrying me through, really. There's somebody carrying me through, really.
And have you managed to forgive John, or how do you feel about him?
John wouldn't expect me to forgive him in the first place. I won't ever forgive him for doing what he did to Zoe and Ella. He wouldn't expect me to. And it's just, the very sad thing is that I believe it could have been prevented.
That's the real tragedy, yeah.
And Zoe and Ella should be here today, you know. It's very sad for John to do what he did. But it's because of his mental illness. That is the reason. My girls aren't with me here today.
That's why you're speaking out, so no mother has to go through what you've had to go through. And I totally salute you for doing that. It's amazing that you're putting all of your energies into this. And I hope the government listen. I hope people are listening to what you say.
Well, the Mental Health Act is being reviewed by an expert group. The findings were due earlier this year, but the group need more time.
Actually, I think, I've just as a matter of interest,
we could get a statement from the HSE to say that they will arrive at the conclusions of their findings shortly.
At which point they will contact you directly to discuss it.
Yeah.
That's from the HSE. I don't know whether they've said that to you or not, but they sent it in to us this morning.
Yeah. The welfare of children is paramount. And when somebody presents themselves to the doctors with mental illness, depression, whatever, if there are children living under the same roof,
there should be an automatic risk assessment.
A risk assessment sent out. Even
I'm surprised that
for a support person to be there for the family, if they have any queries, for them to learn about the illness themselves, to be educated on it and be able to understand it better. But the welfare of children is paramount. And if mental health, the legislation was changed to involve spouses or partners in the treatment, the medical professionals will have a greater insight into the patient's behaviours, and this is all without breaking patient confidentiality.
So what's the blockage in terms of getting this done? Is it
money?
Well, I was going to say that money and resources, first of all. I mean, you're a public servant yourself, you know how tight things are.
Yeah.
And you know that I'm sure you've probably met social workers who've told you that their caseloads are beyond breaking point.
Yeah. But
of course, what price of life?
If they had any concern for there to be a person there, you know, this mightn't, a lot of families wouldn't have any concerns, but if they had, just for a person to be there, to be able for the family to contact, and on the initial stages to be educated about the illness. I think that more independent, in-depth investigations need to be carried out in order for further tragedies to be prevented and for learnings to be had from them. And I'm waiting on an investigation, and the HSE were sidetracked a bit. Well, hopefully, I met with them 2 weeks ago and they're hopefully getting back on track. But this is 3 years later.
When you met with them, I mean, I know it was confidential, but when you say they were sidetracked, it's 3 years in. I mean, what were their findings to date? Did they reveal them to you in any way?
Well, they reviewed John's treatment, and I was to be involved really in the review, and that didn't come about. So it's kind of backtracked a bit, really. So they're going to review it now by involving me.
Why weren't you involved initially?
I don't know, really. I received an apology to say that, you know, I'm sorry we didn't involve you, but so they're going to do it now, hopefully.
Do you think that was an extension of the same mindset that didn't allow you to be involved in it in the first place?
I don't know, really. I think maybe I didn't really receive an explanation about that, really, to be honest.